Welcome to Partnerships for Profit, the podcast where we bring you inside the world of joint ventures, strategic partnerships, and powerful collaborations. Each episode, you'll dive into conversations with top entrepreneurs, visionaries, and business leaders, unlocking the secrets to building profitable relationships that drive growth and success. Whether you're looking to expand your network, find new referral partners, or scale your business, you're in the right place. Let's get started.
Welcome to Partnerships for Profit, presented by LeDuc Entertainment. Today we are joined by Daniel Rubin, who is the founder and managing attorney at Rubin Law. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Adrian. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great having you here. Can we start off? Can you tell me a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Rubin Law?
Sure. So I am an attorney, as you said before, criminal defense attorney. I take cases that are mostly criminal in nature, and I defend people that are accused of crimes. Rubin Law is the brainchild of me and my one of my friends who passed away. He really gave me the idea to go out on my own. And the dream was to be able to take the clients I want to take, to litigate cases the way I wanted to litigate them, and to not have to answer to anyone but me. So that's how I started Rubin Law.
Well, you mentioned that you're defending people who have been accused of crimes, and I'm just wondering, what are some of the, can we dive a little deeper into what are some of the pain points? And obviously, they've been accused of a crime, but what are some of the problems that you're helping them solve in that role?
Yeah, so the pain points are, there's a few, starting with incarceration, right? You get arrested for a crime that say you didn't commit, or they overcharge it or something. I mean, you're still waiting in jail until they can figure out either bail or getting you out on your own recognizance. So that's the first pain point we have to resolve. Can you litigate this case while you're outside the confines of jail? And the other is, how do you attack the problem? I mean, I look at each case like it's kind of a puzzle to solve, right? The question is, can you get someone out scot-free? Can you attack the evidence? Can you help them get away from the case completely? Or do you have to manage the consequences? Do they have your client dead to rights on video, and you have to sort of manage what the expectation is for consequences? So really, those are really the pain points of a criminal case. There are others as you get into it, but that's really what you need to know when you start out.
Now, obviously when you're custom tailoring your approach, like you said, you have to navigate the expectations. Can you tell me a little bit about what that discovery phase with those clients looks like?
Oh man, the discovery phase. Generally as a criminal defense attorney, you're allowed all exculpatory evidence. So the prosecution needs to provide you with any evidence that can potentially exonerate your client. So in the beginning, you basically get the police report, you get a 911 call if one was made, the basics for what brought the case to the front door of the prosecutor. Because remember, the prosecutors don't investigate these cases first off. It's the police departments. It could be the U.S. Marshals or the FBI if you're in federal court. Could be the sheriff's department or the CHP. Whoever brings it to the prosecutor. The prosecutor has the job of presenting the case to its office, and then looking at all the evidence presented by the investigating party, the police, FBI, whatever, and then saying, well, do we have probable cause for a case or not? So the stuff that I get on the first day or first few weeks of a case is those things that were presented, or those things that were presented to the prosecutor's office.
Right.
And it's figuring out what you don't have, subpoenaing documents or other evidence, trying to get people into court to testify, like a preliminary hearing or something. So obviously the discovery gets more and more specific as you get closer with the case.
Right. And I guess I'm curious, like I said, you have to custom tailor that to each individual case, correct?
Exactly. So the question really is, I think for you is, what do people generally expect when they come on in a case? I get it from my end. I know what I have to do, and I know kind of what the routine is. But what do you think, as someone who is unaffiliated with criminal defense, do you feel like, what are like the first questions you would want to know, you think?
Right. I wouldn't even know where to begin. I mean, I would think, what are the circumstances of the case, right?
Right, right. Like, what am I doing here? What are the charges against me? And you kind of have to, I think it's a really good place to start. Like, again, people normally ask, what are my chances, right? Like, what's the likelihood I'm going to go down for whatever it is they're accusing me of?
Right.
It's all fact specific. It's all tailored to each case. Each case is different, but it can be scary, staring
Right.
down the barrel of the proverbial gun.
Yeah. And even though it's custom tailored to each case, are there any sort of overarching strategies that you utilize for each? I mean, is there anything that you find, is there any commonality to your approach?
I mean, it's hard to say. I think there is. I mean, generally, it probably in the way that I deal with clients, and that it's being as transparent as possible, listening to my clients, needs, wants, desires, etc., and trying to get them what they want. Sometimes what they want is unreasonable. I mean, if you're caught on video stealing something and they catch you afterward and there's an overwhelming amount of evidence, I can't exactly get you out of it without, having some price to pay. But what price you pay may be dependent on a number of things: who you are, what your criminal record looks like. Do you have one? Is it checkered, et cetera, et cetera? How much was the item you took potentially? Have they found you doing this before in the same store? All those fact specific things may change what the consequence will be. Like, there are cases where someone, let's say I've had a case where someone stole a t-shirt. They stole a t-shirt, they got caught, they came to me. I basically got it diverted. They went to a program and it was dismissed after they finished the program. But someone else who's gone to Target and stolen a number of things over a period of time, and they've caught him every time, that's going to be a very different case.
Is there, I don't know if I've ever asked this question on the show, and it seems like a simple question. It seems like something I should ask lawyers, but I don't know if I've ever asked it. So forgive me if this is an out there question.
It's okay.
But can you speak a little bit about the importance of jury selection when it comes to criminal defense? I mean, is there a moment, where this is going to be a sympathetic jury, or this is going to be a jury that's, rigid? Or
so at that point, we've already gone to trial. We've already worked up the case. We know what our arguments are going to be. We've got motions in limine. We've done everything up to that point. So the question is jury selection important? Yes, very much so. You obviously want to pick a jury that's going to be sympathetic. You want to know how many preemptory challenges you have, and depending on the case, you can have more or less. You want to know, what you want in a jury. And again, all you need is one juror to say, I don't agree with the prosecution, or I don't agree with the law, whatever it is you're going for. But just because you get that one person to disagree doesn't necessarily mean that they won't refile the case and try again. I mean, just because you get a mistrial doesn't mean that, the case is over, depending on what it is. The Judge Ferguson case going on right now is like that. They got a hung jury. One juror said, I don't buy what the prosecution is selling. 11 said, we do. They couldn't come to an agreement. So the DA has stated they're going to retry the case.
It's like a real life 12 Angry Men.
Like a real life 12 Angry Men. But in that movie, one juror convinced all the others to side with him. Whereas here, the juror was not able to convince everyone. So it was 11-1.
You're right.
So in the case where the jury is overwhelming, even if it's, let's say, over half, it's very unlikely it's going to be retried.
What sort of, excuse me one moment. I don't know if you can hear that. There is an alarm going off. Hold on just one moment. Alexa decided that she just wanted to set an alarm off that I didn't have set for some reason. I apologize for that. That's very unprofessional of me. Good Lord.
You're trying to get me to stop talking. I was talking.
No, but please. I'm curious, with this sort of, is there a piece of evidence when you go in, is there any piece of evidence? Now, obviously, cameras don't lie. So that is what it is. But if there is no camera, present, if there's no footage or anything like that, what sort of pieces of evidence do you look for to prove a client's innocence?
Wow. I think that's very fact specific.
Mm.
There was, I mean, it really just depends. I have a attempted murder case that I'm working on right now, and you want to find some sort of issue with the witnesses. One of the witnesses is pretty old. She's probably the star witness and the alleged victim. So you'd want to examine her and figure out what's going on, and if she'd stand by what she said, what her health situation is, things like that.
Mm.
In that particular case, though, that witness has passed away.
Mm.
So the question is, how do you get that information? Well, you try to get whatever doctor information you can, if that's allowed. You can try to get some corroborating evidence that would discredit what she said. But really, it's a challenging case because you have a victim that doesn't exist anymore, and you have you have much of her statements that won't be able to come in depending on what was said.
Mm.
So it's very case specific.
Right.
But I mean, generally, the police report is something that the prosecution will rely on pretty heavily.
Right.
So you want to really look into those officers. If you can get into their backgrounds, not always possible, but if you can,
Right.
definitely something you should do. You want to examine the police report to see if it matches up with any of the video, audio, or documentary evidence you have. Because as we all know, cops may not always tell the truth, or they may embellish a bit. So it's important to figure out, where we are with that.
Right. Well, I have to imagine that, body cams on cops wasn't always a thing. I have to imagine that has widely changed your industry and field.
Yeah. I mean, body cams tend to keep cops honest, which is great. The problem is that if where there may have been some doubt before as to an eyewitness, like for example, if the cop is, let's say, has a checkered past, but now he's telling the truth, you can bring up that checkered past in cross-examination and show the jury, or at least attempt to show the jury, that maybe veracity isn't this cop's strong suit.
Right.
But that same cop with that same issue in his past now is wearing a body camera, and your client is dead to rights, not doing the thing he was supposed to do. That's going to be a problem for your client.
Right.
So it kind of is a double-edged sword in a way.
Have you ever run into an issue where, and I feel like this has probably happened more than, people would care to say, but have you ever run into an issue where that when you're, in that discovery phase and trying to find out what happened, that a client is lying to you?
All right. So yes, the short answer is yes. But when I sit down with a client, the first thing I tell them is, I have some duties to you and you've got some duties to me.
Right.
My duty to you is obviously duty of care, loyalty, making sure I keep you in the loop, making sure that I defend you, keeping whatever secrets you tell me confidential. It's the utmost importance, right? But my client's duties to me are twofold. One, keep me updated as to whatever's happening related to this case. An investigator reaches out, someone comes forward and says something, you change your address, anything, and also to be as honest as possible.
Right.
The only way I'm most effective is if my client is completely honest with me.
Absolutely.
So I know there are some lawyers are like, I don't want to know what happened. Don't tell me what happened. Tell me if you did or not. I want to know. I want to know, what happened, what your perspective on it was, and try to be as honest with me as possible. If we can't be open and honest, then it's really going to limit my effectiveness in court.
Absolutely. Are there any common mistakes that you see your clients making, that you see people who have been charged with a crime making?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, never represent yourself. Even if you're a trained attorney and you do this all the time, God forbid I'm arrested for anything, I am calling one of my peers to represent me. You're too close to it. If you go to trial, it'll be very difficult to direct examine yourself. It makes things very convoluted. And even if you don't have a solid command over, criminal defense, over the law, over your rights, you're going to end up making mistakes.
Right.
And that could just be, scheduling issues, not knowing when to file certain motions and the deadlines for doing that. Especially if you're incarcerated, you end up being incarcerated for longer because you don't know the rights that are attributed to you. You don't know how to work with a prosecutor.
Right.
You're at a disadvantage dealing with law libraries in the jail or in prison. You definitely want to get counsel.
Right.
Do people generally, as far as making mistakes, talking to police officers? This is probably the number one mistake. When you get arrested, first thing everyone knows is he's on CSI. What's the first right, Adrian? Do you know?
Miranda rights.
Yeah.
Plead the fifth.
The right to remain silent. Exactly.
Yeah, right.
You got the right to remain silent. Use it.
Use it. Yeah.
100%. And before they start asking you any questions, you say, I want to see my lawyer.
Yeah.
I'm the lawyer to talk to. That will account for 99% of all the mistakes that happen in my case, account from talking to cops when you shouldn't.
Right.
You can't talk your way out of it. It's very rare you can. You are not the one to do it. Don't think you're the one to do it. Just clam up, serve your rights, and call counsel.
There's a reason that's in place.
100%.
Absolutely.
And they don't always need to give it to you before they start talking to you. You need to be in a custodial setting. They need to be basically under arrest. So they don't have to give you your rights first. But if anyone who's listening to this, if anything happens, God forbid, do not talk to police officers. Reserve your right to remain silent and then ask for an attorney.
I'm curious. Now, this might be a big loaded question. This might be something you can't even talk about for all I know. But have you ever run into a situation where you discovered that a client has tried to hide evidence?
So yes. And it's very complicated with what to do when that happens.
Right.
There are certain ethical obligations you have to the court. If it's an ongoing crime, it's an issue too. So that is a very fact-specific question as to what to do.
Right.
And it may be something that, they hid evidence to their own detriment. For example, if there is a murder weapon or something that a friend used and that would completely exonerate your client, that's something that I would want to know, right? The DNA evidence would definitively prove my client didn't do it. That's a big mistake. They should definitely tell me about that. But obviously, that's a very specialized example. There are others, but it's very fact specific as to what you have to do. It does trigger some ethical obligations depending on what it is. And it's that if you have an issue with that, it's best to contemplate what to do with your attorney before talking about the details of that hidden evidence.
Right. Now, is criminal defense the only area that Rubin Law focuses on, or are there other areas of practice that Rubin Law focuses on as well?
So I do handle civil cases as well. I have a pending, I'm both plaintiff and defense. But I've got to feel really strongly about the case to commit to it.
Right.
A civil case generally runs between 2 and 5 years, depending on what it is. And it really just depends on whether I feel like I can handle the case because it's, just me and a law clerk.
Right.
But at the same time, also it's going to be a lot of work over a long period of time, especially plaintiff cases, which are on contingency generally. So I've really got to feel strongly about the case to want to take it.
Right.
I actually have a civil case right now, plaintiff's case, where the Riverside Police Department stole horses from my client.
What?
I know, it's a crazy case. My client was cited for alleged animal cruelty. We will get into whether or not an 80-year-old man can be cruel to animals at some point, I'm sure. My client is 80 years old and suffering from dementia. And they've been, Department of Animal Services has been harassing him for some time. Anyway, the rural response team in Riverside takes 5 horses, claiming that they've been malnourished. Again, claiming, not under no examination, just they say these have been malnourished.
Wow.
They come back about 2 weeks later and they take the rest of his horses. He's got about 40 on his property. And then about a month later, they take horses from a different property. The property is in my client's name, but the horses belong to somebody else. So they take about roughly 60 horses. And they say that these horses have been malnourished or whatever, but nobody is able to examine them. We ask to get them back. They don't respond. And there's usually like a 14-day period to request that they be returned.
Mm.
Inside that 14-day period, they were already listed for adoption and sale.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then they held my client in his criminal case for a $2 million bail for 5 counts of animal cruelty,
Oh,
which is
wow.
about 10 times what's prescribed in the fee schedule. So
Wow.
10 times more than what you'd normally be held for. And it's an 80-year-old man being held in jail for a $2 million bail.
Wow.
That's what like people suspected of murders, like drive-by shootings.
Right.
So
Right.
there was definitely a problem there, and we're going to figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, that's a wild case. Good Lord.
I'm very choosy about the civil cases that I take.
Right. I'm curious, what inspired you to focus your efforts and your practice on criminal defense? How did you get into this role?
It's a very good question. I went to law school to be able to help people.
Mm.
Namely, I was never the best kid growing up. So I wanted to be the person that people would turn to say, hey, like, get me out of this. How do I get myself out of this mess that I've gotten myself into?
Right.
And a lot of the time, it's not simply, hey man, like we'll get you out of jail, we'll do whatever. That's kind of where it starts. And then people come to me, they have mental health issues, usually sometimes undiagnosed, sometimes going on for years, drug addiction issues. They made massive mistakes that are impacting their life, and it's trying to figure out where to go from there. Treatment options, dealing with like addiction issues, and basically trying to show the prosecutor that this is kind of a one-off deal, or that they should have the opportunity to be remade as people rather than just serving time in jail or in prison.
Right.
At the end of the day, what happens if you're someone who's suffering from some of these issues and you get out of jail or get out of prison?
Right.
Same problems.
Yeah.
Probably even worse. So it's having the opportunity to work on those things, which I find to be most rewarding.
Now, you mentioned that you mentioned that you got into this because you have this desire to help people. Is that something that's just innate to you as a person, or is that something that you've cultivated along the way?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I think, on the one hand, I think I woke up one morning in college and I was like, hey, like I want to do something that really helps people. And I also think that I had this desire to sort of change the world for the better.
Right.
Many people do this macroscopically. They go into politics, they become teachers and teach a lot of people. I mean, for me, I'm more concerned with my one-off clients. Can I help this person's life? Can I change this person's world? And that's who I am. I'm really at the grassroots level of changing the world for the better, hopefully for the better.
That's a great answer. I'm curious, when you speak with people, do you ever come across a situation where this is a person that just got mixed up in the wrong place, wrong time, they just caught a bad break here, this is somebody that is worthy of rehabilitation and reintroduction into society? Is there ever a time though that's the opposite, where you're like, this person's too far gone, they are beyond my help?
I think that everyone should get a shot at rehabilitation. I know that might not be popular with many people, but I think that with very few exceptions, I think everyone should have a ability at least to rehabilitate.
Right.
And rehabilitation doesn't necessarily mean going to jail. It doesn't mean necessarily going to prison. But I think it really is case specific as to what that rehabilitation entails. But I think that for the most part, everyone can change. It really just depends on, what the circumstances are to get them to change.
Right.
You just have to believe that. We can probably have this philosophical debate for forever. But at least by and large, the people that I've met through my profession, I believe that every single person I've met has the ability to change.
Yeah. I mean, that's such, you'd almost, in your role, you'd have to look at it right? Like to some degree, is it hard for you to sort of, I mean, because I know that you in your role, you're dealing with all these emotions and people are generally coming to you on their worst day. Do you find it hard to sort of compartmentalize it and say, I've got to leave those emotions here at work so that I can, have my time here at home? Is it hard to not bring it home?
I think that's why I have a really dark sense of humor. I think
Mm.
I brought it home in the healthiest way that I know how. And anyone who knows me would say, yeah, he's got a pretty dark sense of humor. Because, I mean, you're exposed to a lot of, horrible stuff, from everything from grisly pictures of car accidents to murder to, sex cases. I mean, you really see like people at their worst. You're right. That's a stellar observation. But I think the fact is when I go home, it's just, I'm actually probably a different person with my family than I am at work. At work, I'm someone who needs to know everything and be on top of things and be extremely competent. And I can go home and be with my daughters and be very silly.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I think part of it is having a very dark sense of humor. Part of it is thinking that I'm really trying to do my best to help everyone. And I think the thing that I really can't shake though is having free time when like my clients are sitting in custody. And I
Right.
want to do the best I can for my clients and I want to be there all the time. But I do have to take some time for myself and for my family, and really finding that balance is the issue.
Mm.
If I could, I'd be working all day, every day, trying to get everyone out of custody, or at least trying to move cases along so they can get out of custody eventually. But I can't always do that. I've got to be someone who is a three-dimensional person and not just doing what I do all day, every day.
Right.
It wouldn't be very effective if I did that, quite frankly.
Now this might be a big loaded question. This might be one of those big loaded questions. But I was wondering if you could share with us, when you think back on all the people that you have helped with Rubin Law, when you think back on all the people you've helped, is there a story that you could share with us of someone that stands out that you really saw a positive transformation in as a result of your help?
Yeah, this is probably the case I'm most proud of. And this actually happened years ago before I opened Rubin Law. This is the case that I worked on exclusively. I had a client who had been in and out of rehab programs, mental institutions, et cetera, et cetera. Nothing stuck. And at one point he was outside a mental health facility and he was having a manic episode. We know he was having a manic episode because later on in the investigation, he was talking about what had happened and what he was thinking and feeling at the time. And he was actually trying to physically harm himself.
Oh, wow.
Because he believed that it would somehow help his family or friends or whomever. And again, this is all what he discussed in the interview. The police officers came to bring him to a hospital, to 5150 him, which is the Welfare and Institutions Code for putting someone into a hospital because they're a danger to themselves or others. So they were going to pick them up and take them to the hospital. And this person was placed into the back of a squad car without handcuffs, which is in violation of procedure. My client, who was in the middle of a manic episode and really was not one with reality, managed to take the firearm, the assault weapon that was in the police car because it was not locked properly. And the partition wasn't functioning properly either. So a number of things happened,
Right,
lined up perfectly to get this horrific situation. So he loaded the weapon and he's sitting there with this weapon, a guy who has never fired a gun before in his whole life. The guy's about in his late teens or 20s at this point. And he's sitting there and we can see, and I see him in the back camera of the police car, and he's holding this firearm like this, like just moving it around like a child, like looking and investigating it. And accidentally, and again, we can see this because it's on the video, the weapon discharges. And it goes right to the back of the window of the police car, and the two officers freak out. Now, what do they do first, right? They point their guns at this car. Now, some police cars are reinforced, so I'm not sure what their handguns would have done to this car, but they point their guns at this car, and now my client is having this manic episode, and he believes like he's in the middle of a war zone. And I know all this because this was, he said this in the interview later to the police officers. So he's basically in a standoff for hours with the police. Wow. They have to call SWAT. They have to get him out of the car. They finally coax him out of the car after hours of doing this. And the whole time he's sitting there with his weapon, with it clenched in his arms for dear life, like this. And finally, the case gets to me, and he's got 17 different counts of multiple felonies. He's looking at years and years in prison. And this is all attributed to a bunch of mistakes that the officers made and his illness.
Wow.
So I was able to show the judge after a certain time of being with the case that this was all basically a giant accident, that he has no desire to be harmful or to harm anybody else. He's not a violent person. And that his mental health issues were severe enough that triggered this issue. And without putting blame on the officers for this unhappy series of accidents, said that but for his mental health issue, this never would have happened.
Right.
And not only did the judge agree and allow him to be placed on diversion, at the end of the day, his case was wiped clean.
Wow.
No 17 counts, no nothing. And the best part about this story is not my success, but his success. He did the work all through his diversion period. He's gone to therapy since then. He's taken his medication since then. There's been no issues. And now he's working as a substitute teacher.
Wow.
He's doing really well.
Wow.
So that really is the best story that I have from this. And it's why I keep doing what I'm doing, because without someone like me, without someone who really cared about this, without someone who was able to convince a judge that he was redeemable, he wouldn't have been redeemed. He would be in prison right now.
Wow. That's absolutely incredible. Daniel, this has been an awesome, awesome conversation. I mean, really insightful. I've learned a lot about criminal defense and what it is you do. If anybody out there could use your help, could use the help of Rubin Law, where can the people find you?
You can find me at www.rubinlawpc.com. You can call me 213-723-2337. And that goes directly to my office. I answer each and every call. And you can email me at drubin@rubinlawpc.com.
Daniel, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was incredible.
Thank you. I really appreciate when I get an opportunity to talk about my clients and the profession. It's something that I love. It's something that I find extremely interesting. Obviously, I will talk about this.
I do too.
Forever if you let me. But I'm only as effective as people who come in through as I have people coming in through the door. So I'd like to be able to help as many people as possible.
That's amazing. Daniel, thank you so much again. This was awesome.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it, Adrian.
And thank you everyone for listening. This has been Partnerships for Profit, presented by LeDuc Entertainment. Thanks again, Daniel.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Partnerships for Profit. We hope you've gained valuable insights on how to form profitable partnerships and take your business to the next level. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. Got a partnership story to share or someone you'd like to see featured on the show? Reach out to us. Until next time, keep building those partnerships for profit.